Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Mr. President. Division 7, Gary Van Dam.
Here.
Division 6, Audrey Miller. Here. Division 5, Robert Paris.
Here.
Division 4, George Lane. Division 1, Shelley Forcible. Here. Division 3, Frank Donato. Division 2, Keith Dias.
Here.
General Manager Chisam.
Here.
James Markman.
Here.
And Holly Hughes present.
Thank you very much. Item 3, voluntary public roll call. If any member of the public wishes to introduce themselves, please feel free to do so now.
Vincent Dino, Palmdale Water District.
Thank you, Vince.
Jack Cephas, White Fence 3.
Thank you, Jack.
John Eucas, Ted, White Fence Farms 1 and 2.
Thank you, John.
Hi,
Chad Reed, Courtsville Water District.
Hi, Chad.
John Joyce, Roseman News.
Hello, John. Item 4, public comments and period open to the public. If anyone wishes to address the board on any item not on the agenda, please feel free to do so now. Hearing none. Item 5, do I have a motion to adopt tonight's agenda? Thank you.
This is Director Miller. I'll second.
Thanks, Andrew. Roll call, vote, please.
Gary Van Dam.
Yes.
Audrey Miller. Yes. Robert Paris.
Yes.
George Lane. Shelley Forcible.
Yes.
Frank Donato. Keith Dias.
Yes. The measure passes. Thank you. Item 6, presentation and workshop on fiscal year 2021-2022 budget. Mr. Chisam.
Thank you, Board President Dias and members of the board. Happy to provide a presentation on the 2021-2022 fiscal budget.
You are muted. You can mute or unmute yourself by pressing star 6.
Thank you. So we'll start out the presentation with a refresher with regards to our mission statement. The mission of Avek is to deliver reliable, sustainable, and a high-quality supplemental water to the region in a cost-effective and efficient manner. The presentation overview for tonight, we'll talk a little bit about the work plan over the next year. We'll take a look at some historical perspective with regards to operation costs, revenues, and expenses. We'll look at the proposed Avek budget. We'll also review the capital improvement plan that was recommended by the Capital Improvement Committee. We'll also look at the personnel budget that was recommended from the Personnel Committee. Also, we'll take a look at our reserve amounts through this year and into the next fiscal year. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. So for the work plan for 21-22, we wanted to, it's a very dry year this year, and the agency has used a good, we'll be using most of its carryover water from previous years that we had in San Luis. So the development of the 2022 water delivery plan is at the very high level of priority. And the plan is based on having a 7,000 acre feet coming from the State Water Project, which is the the 5% Table A allocation. So for budgeting purposes, we're assuming this 5% allocation. And this also the other sources of water, we're looking at 13,761 acre-feet of water from other sources, and the staff is working with various agencies such as Metropolitan Water District, Cajon Ranch, Mojave Water District, and others to develop those additional imported supplies. The agency will also use 22,000 acre-feet of stored imported water that we currently have in the High Desert Water Bank for this next year. So those are the basis under which we developed this plan, and this is a recommendation from the Finance Committee to take a very conservative approach with regards to the Table A allocation and make appropriate financial plans for acquiring this additional water supply. Second of all, we want to continue with the design and construction of
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound. Enter your participant ID followed by pound. Otherwise, just press pound to continue. You are in the meeting now. There are 18 participants in the meeting. This meeting is being recorded.
in 14 and 15, we see the water sales went down significantly and have stayed at this level.
You are muted. You can mute or unmute yourself by pressing star 6.
Measures that were undertaken during the last drought period, and they've continued on. These are the periods 2019, 2017, 2016. This is when most of the water that is contained within the West Side Water Bank was stored when we had this excess water here, so we could utilize it in these dry years. So you can see we have a very low allocation in 2021, and this is based on a calendar year basis, and then we're anticipating a very low allocation in 2022. So when we look at total water sales, you can see this is on a fiscal year basis, and it's associated with dollar amounts. And you can see that we've had this continuing escalation since the very low period of the drought, and the effect of our water sales revenues. This is our property tax revenues over the last 10, 11 years, and you can see that the property tax rate has not changed. The assessed value has continued to increase over those years. You can see in 11 and 12, towards the end of the crash, so to speak, where assessed values were the lowest, and they've steadily increased since that time. So that's where we are with regards to property tax revenues.
That's your share of the 1%?
That's our share.
That doesn't include the bonds?
No, it doesn't. Bonds are expensive, so this is just our share of 1%.
Can you give George a mic, because I can't hear him. So that question, what was asked? Frank, I just asked if that was just our share of the 1%, and excluding the bonds. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So this is the graph of our state water contract fixed costs. These are the costs that are covered by the taxes that we receive. And you can see that they've basically gone up and down a little bit over the last 7 or 8 years. But this last 3-year period, you can see this increase here. And we can anticipate that these state water fixed costs are going to continue to increase on a fairly consistent level during this over the next 4 or 5 year period. There's close to $1 to $2 billion worth of repair work that's necessary to be constructed in the next 10 years or so, and so that these cost recovery numbers we can anticipate are going to continue. With regards to operating costs, once again, this is on a fiscal year basis, and these are very dependent on water that's actually delivered. So this is the drought period before. This is where some of the more wet periods were for these 3 years, so our operating costs were higher. This is primarily the pumping.
Recording in progress.
Attached piece.
And so depends on exactly how much water we receive will affect our operating costs. And you can see in 2021 it came down a little bit because we had less
water in 2021. And this is the last graph that I want to show you. And what this shows is the actual water sales in dollars versus our operating expenses. The operating expenses are in this burnt orange color. Water sales are in the blue. And you can see how those have gone. And you can see in the last few years, operating expenses have been higher than our water sales. And what has helped out tremendously is this purple color, which is the transfer exchanges that we've utilized to kind of balance out any deficiencies in the operating costs. Sure. The next wanted to report a success story. The board approved a health insurance cost savings program. A couple of years ago, we started out modestly with 7 participants, and in 2020, we got up to 18 participants.
It saved the agency approximately $26,000. And we added 7 more this last fiscal year, so it's increased our savings by about $41,000. And we have a total of about 43 employees, so we're creeping up to get more and more. This is also it's turned out this is a very beneficial program not only for the agency but for the employees who get an opportunity to use the health savings account for investing in other methods that will help them along down the line. So it's a good program on both sides, and it's been a success. I wanted to let you know that. Also, we've included in the budget for our 5-year financial plan, a 7.5% rate increase. And you can see the amount of revenue that the rate increase would generate. And just so that the board is aware, we're a little over $2 million. And that's for the next year, which is 2022. And there's about $1 million that would be included in this fiscal year budget because our fiscal year only goes to June 30th of 2022. Budget assumptions that we used in preparation of the budget is we assumed our property tax revenue would be the same as it's received in 2020 and 2021. This is a conservative approach. Also, we have water sales anticipated at about 43,000 acre feet, just shy of 43,000 acre feet. And this is based on the 5-year financial plan that was adopted by the board. And once again, I've mentioned this, we're assuming these amounts of water for meeting the demands of our customers and getting that 43,000 acre feet delivered to our customers over the course of next year. Yes?
I have a question. Yeah. So let's just say, okay, first of all, we use 22,000 acre feet of stored water. How much is that going to leave the agencies and reserves and groundwater retention?
Approximately 40,000 acre feet.
Okay. So right now, we've been, this year and next year, it's been in a $20,000 acre feet category.
Correct.
So this is a really kind of a good test because we've always said we wanted to have a minimum of 3 years and try to capitalize on 5 years. So if anybody asks us for above 42,000 acre feet of water, let's say that it was orders up to 50,000, we'd have to grab another 8,000 acre feet out of the ground, correct?
Actually, we wouldn't be able to do that. We would have to acquire that additional 8,000 feet through imported water supplies.
We can't get it.
Well, then we'll have to have a shortage. That's our shortage plan that we have for us. But you got to take a little bit of a step back here and realize that one of the things that if this would occur, before our water banks or early in our water banks, we wouldn't have this 22,000 acre feet to be delivered.
I understand. That's not what the question is. The question is I wanted to bring to everybody who's on this Zoom call to understand that was a good point, that if we didn't do what we did, we wouldn't have that 22,000. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that you didn't say the word. The word is that we're not going to be able to deliver it, and there'll have to be a moratorium.
Well,
I'm asking you. I'm asking you if we have orders for another 8,000 acre feet of water above the 42,000, and we can't buy table A, what are we going to do?
Well, we wouldn't be able to deliver, and the various retail water agencies would have to make up that water supply through their own pumping capabilities.
Okay, so that's a good point. And then how many of those people are not hooked up to AVAC they are hooked up to AVAC, but they're not operating their wells? Yeah.
Well, I best to my knowledge is I hope that they have the ability to pump water. They're all trying to make sure that they can meet the service to their retail agencies, and AVAC's going to do what it can to deliver that 43,000 acre feet, and the balance would have to be make up. If there was a 50,000 acre foot demand on AVAC, the balance would have, what we couldn't acquire in additional supplies would have to be made up by the local agencies.
Well, even if we could acquire it, most likely the water would be twice as much as we're paying now, and right. We'd have to have a mechanism in there for them to pay for it, not spread that across all the other people. The thing I would like to see happen for this board is to send a letter out to all our water agencies that we actually serve through the AVAC system, putting them on notice that they need to fine-tune their wells just in case for emergency purposes. They better be all up and running well, because we might not be able to supply them their demands.
Okay.
And the reason I bring that up, if we don't tell them that and we can show a pie in the sky, they're going to say, hey, why didn't you tell us that you guys are that there's a potential issue in the future? Because see, they're not digging in the reserves to fix their and bring their wells up to current status for these type of things. I'm putting this on the record because I want everybody to know that I said this, because I have a feeling if we get 5% next year and we get 50,000 acre feet of water orders, we're not going to be able to find water. Two things are going to happen. If we do find water, it's probably going to be somewhere in the $1,000 to $2,000 an acre foot. And that's one issue. That means their water rate's going to go from $600 an acre foot up to about $700 an acre foot. So these are things that, everybody's leaning on AVAC to be prepared and to have the stuff available. but the question is at what cost? And that's what we need to be aware of. You know, we can't predict Mother Nature next year, and I think you did a good job assuming, I would use the word assume, that we're only going to get 5%, 5% of our entitlement in 2022 when you're doing this budget. I think that was a very good thing.
Any other questions with regards to this slide, this slide here? Also, some additional budget assumptions that we have for in the budget itself is, as I mentioned previously, the 7.5% water rate increase that's contained in the 5-year financial plan, a 4.2% COLA adjustment, which is consistent with past practice of using the Los Angeles and Long Beach Anaheim index. And then we have some assumed increased costs in our aqua plant with Blue Cross at 5%, Kaiser, and those were included in the budget. So, if you, Holly, could you go over to the handout? So the handout provides a cost comparison of our budget between last year's budget and this year's budget, and it's a little bit different this year because of the sources of water that the agency will be utilizing. So the first thing I want to note is that when you look at the top line, which is water sales, you can see the water sales have gone down from $33 million to $29 million. That's the difference between the 50,000 acre feet that we've used in prior budgets for water sales versus the actual 43,000 acre feet that we're using in 21-22 in revenue there. As I mentioned previously, the water transfers and exchanges, we're anticipating no water transfers and exchanges, but we do have the San Gregorio lease revenue included, which is the $2.4 million in this particular line here. So this gives us a total operating revenue of $31,809,000. So as we move down to our operating expenses, and we look at the big differences, I wanted to make note the water purchases. This is the variable costs that we pay to DWR to import water. And as Director Donato mentioned, the Finance Committee recommended that we increase this number to by a couple $1 million in anticipation that there would be some additional costs associated with the acquisition of that additional 13,000 acre feet that I talked about previously. And you can see the rest of the numbers are pretty much the same with the expense, with the travel and transportation expense increasing by 28%. But the agency entered into a lease program on its fleet vehicles and turned a capital expense into an operating expense. So there would be a corresponding reduction in the capital program because there is no vehicle replacement in the capital. So it's not really, actually we'll end up saving money in the long run with the lease program versus what we've done in the past. So we have a total.
Question, so on the personnel expenses, like give me some hypotheticals what that would be.
Yes, we have a whole section on personnel, Director Donato, and we'll go into this number and show you exactly.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yes. So you can see we end up with a total of $33 million with the $2 million change in the total operating expenses. If we move down to the non-operating revenues, this is
in depreciation. Years ago we had a separate account for that. Do we still do that or not?
Yes. Yeah, we have, that goes into, I want to make sure Teresa's exactly where does the depreciation go? You want to come up? Yeah, that's for reserves.
That's used for part of our replacements and.
Right. We'll have a section where we talk about the replacements and what we call the asset management projects that spend some of that depreciation money. So that's what we have there. As far as the property tax revenues, you can see there's a 10% increase from the prior year, which is, and that's, as I mentioned previously, that's associated with increased assessed values. We've maintained our investment income at the same amount. We all have this other income, which is associated with reimbursements that we received from Tajon Ranch for the fixed costs that they incur for that $3,800, 3,800 acre feet, I should say, that the agency acquired for Tajon a few years ago. Also, our water master reimbursements go in there, any grant funding. So that's what you see there as far as that revenue source. And so when you take a look at add it all up, we've got about $37 million in total non-operating revenues. If you move down a little further, you can see that this is
that water we received from the home. Is that state water project water, or is that?
Yes.
So we're just receiving a percentage of that, or is that
in other words, we pay the DWR bill for the total of the 144.8, but I think it's 3,800 acre feet is dedicated to Tajon, so they reimburse us for that 3,800 acre feet of state water costs, and that's the line item that where that's accounted for. So when you add the non-operating expenses up, we're close to 31 million. So when we move down further and take a look at where we're at, you can see our total revenues would be 68.8 million, and then our total expenses would be 64.7 million. Which gives us about a 4.1 million balance where we're in the black with regards to our budget. Okay.
This is Director Sourceable. What percentage do we normally have for our revenue versus expenses, the percentage that we have left?
It's we keep it right. We keep it right around that 2 to 3 million because we're trying to balance essentially it's a balanced budget scenario. So
could you go back one?
Sure.
So this is 4 million now.
Yes, and that's associated with the change, $2 million increased expense that was recommended by the Finance Committee.
Well, my point being is, are we collecting too much in fees because we have a $4 million in revenue, extra revenue?
No, I think this gets us pretty close to where we need to be, and any excess that we have goes into reserves, which end up offsetting, capital improvement costs that we have that we don't have to charge rates for.
Yeah, well, I know it sounds like a lot of money, but versus our budget, it's not a lot of money. So right. I just thought I wanted to ask that question. Thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty low on a percentage basis.
Yes.
You go back when you get a chance.
Okay. You want to go up the...
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Go back to the presentation.
Just keep it there a second.
Okay, hang on. George is still looking.
You just go. You were there a second. Just
go down a little bit.
No, I'm trying to look at.
Okay, good. Do you want some wine?
Yeah, I'll have some.
You want to go down a little more? Or?
The other income and non-operating revenues, it don't have to be detailed, but basically we got $1.2 million. Where's that?
That's the Tejon Ranch reimbursement. Yeah, that's the vast majority of it.
Yeah, to remind the board, we're still, property tax revenue is still supplementing the water rates, and it went up roughly $3 million. It's projected, and some agencies do that, and some do not. There's a lot of questions on that, especially for the people who don't receive any imported water, any Avek water. So you have a lot of the valley that's does not receive water. It's supplementing those who do receive water.
And you're correct, Director Lane. However, last year in the work that was done with the Water Rates Committee, that was changed so that the property tax revenue is not included, or any of the excess property tax revenue is not included in the water rate calculation, so that we can correct that problem, as you mentioned, and make sure that the water rates are self-sufficient for the operating costs. And whatever excess revenues that are associated with property tax are put into the property tax reserve, so that we can maintain or keep our maintain our property tax rate where it is and not have to increase it.
So
Moving forward,
it's put into
reserve just for that purpose. And in case we get this, for instance, if we had a larger spike than we would have tax revenues for, we could tap that revenue source and be able to utilize that, so we don't have to raise the tax rate.
We've had that in the past.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, back to the presentation. All right. You know what happened to it, huh? Okay, we got it back. Okay, so this slide here gives you budget comparison for the 2022. It kind of takes a look at where we were and what we received in actual revenues. So you can see from last year, we budgeted revenues of almost $72 million. We actually received $86 million in those revenues, which is about 17% above our budgeted revenues. And then the budgeted expenses are at, we're at $66 million, and our actual expenses came in at $55 million, which is about 17% below. And so and a lot of that is associated with the difference between the 50,000 acre feet that we utilize in the actual water sales, which were closer to the 43,000 acre feet that's contained in this budget year. So, okay, let's move on. So if you look at the 2021-2022 budget, you can see that our budget revenues have gone down approximately 4.2%, or 3.1 million, and then we have a corresponding expense reduction of 3.9 million as compared to the budgeted expenses between the 2 years. So. Here's our capital budget for additions to the capital budget, and you can see that the top 4 projects, we have a total that the Capital Improvement Committee recommended be included in the budget, and that's 10.25 million, with 10 million being the first year of the design and construction expenses for the SNP Phase 2. As the board is aware, the SNP Phase 2 is finishing up the design for that project, and we want to expedite the construction of that project in this fiscal year, and including possibly purchasing the high lift pumps and also some of the pipeline that will be necessary for that project. So that's the addition. There is approved projects that are carried over from previous years of $13 million that are shown here. You can see 5 or 6 of those are awarded and moving along. So, but we've only added $10 million, and the $250,000 is associated with investigating our tank farm, the West Feeder pipeline, and so that when in a couple of years, when we look to do some capital improvements or improvements in maintaining those facilities, that we'll be able to have a basis for what is going to be necessary to complete that work.
I got a question on the item regarding EWB. Is that Eastside Water Bank?
Correct.
Why are we spending $4 million?
That's an approved project, and as you may remember, Director Donato, we were anticipating receiving grant funds for that project, and we were not successful in the last round, but we will continue to proceed to get grants funds in order to facilitate any construction work on the East Side Water Bank.
Yeah, but that's what I'm asking. What are we doing with? What are we doing more than what's already there?
If you remember correctly, Director Donato, the agency purchased some additional land around I think it's the east side of the project, and more earthen ponds are going to be constructed with some additional recovery facilities.
Well, I got to. So why don't we just tie into the Scataglia building and start growing weed? I mean, everybody next door.
Well,
yeah, I mean, I'm saying, I got a question. What are they using for pumps?
I'm not sure.
Well, aren't they? I mean, what I'm trying to figure out is, you got a big agricultural operation next door. Are they using wells? And if they're using wells, we are recharging those wells to do their commercial business?
I would have to look.
I'm bringing it up because I'm not making a joke. I'm serious. There's probably 50 canopies outside, right there next to that building, and I know that we use that well for emergency use, and now we're going to be putting more water in the ground. There's got to be some kind of correlation of how we put water in the ground and somebody commercially is taking that water. Okay. I think another thing we need to look at is that water, they don't have any water rights for that well. 0. So are they is there a transfer of water rights going to that well, or are they just pumping out AVAC water that we're recharging with and spending $4.5 million?
Well, I think that we'd have to investigate that, but the water master would be the one who would regulate the.
Well, first I think we do is staff go out there and drive around, maybe a couple of directors, see the complex. You'll see what I'm talking. I'm not making this up. It ain't some little teepee out there. And you need to ask a couple of questions. Where are they getting the water for that operation?
Okay.
So 450,000 square foot building, and right to the south end of that building, there's probably a good 50 acres of it that's under cultivation with greenhouse canopies. So that water's coming from either the ground or Little Rock Irrigation District's really kind enough to give them the water. And I don't want to be spending a ton of money recharging the groundwater basin over there if they're pumping this water for free.
Okay.
So I think we need to really seriously look at that. The water master is going to ask you the questions, what you just said to me. Well, we'll have to look into it. What do you mean look into it? I think we should look into it because we're the ones that are building this multi-million-dollar project to recharge groundwater and also to improve our drinking water quality instead of using membrane facilities. Isn't that correct?
Correct. It's a good point. We need to know that.
Yeah, the water's coming from somewhere.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, so this is very serious. This is a serious situation. We need to find out where they're getting that water.
Okay. We'll report back.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to ask John Pazzi.
Oh, I had a question on the last slide. I'm sorry. This is Director Sourceable. I wanted to know if you have a new estimate for the SNP Phase 2.
We don't have an official estimate right now. We're working on that estimate with Kennedy Jenks, and we should have a new estimate to talk with the Capital Finance Committee in the next couple of weeks, actually.
Okay, great, because I know it won't affect this budget, but it would be good for the board to know what our final obligation is looking like.
Yes, and we'll have to look at like we always do. We'll have to look at cost benefit ratio and other things as far as moving forward with that project. And as we all know, prices have gone up on steel and other steel pipe and other factors. So, but that's as far as the first year, that's sufficient.
Thank you.
Bet. To come up and provide a little explanation of the asset management projects, and these are the projects, George, that that we look at when we do our depreciation. So these are the asset projects that were funded through that program.
Thank you, Dwayne. Good evening, everybody. Okay, so we met with the Capital Project Committee a while back and reviewed these projects for our 2021-2022 fiscal plan. Proposed in the 2020-2022 asset replacement management budget are new projects in the amount of $2,545,000. And then we have some carryover projects from last year's budget that were approved at $1,030,000. The carryover projects, like I said, were approved last year, but they weren't completed due to lack of time and or manpower. We're developing our maintenance department and trying to do more projects in-house. And we're better positioned this year than we were last year to complete most, if not all, of these projects. By doing these projects in-house, as you know, we'll reduce the expense of contracting with outside vendors and contractors. So in operations, there's a lot of moving parts, treatment plants, distribution systems. Each part, whether it's a valve, an actuator, instrumentation, pumps, they all have an expected useful service life. And our job in operations and maintenance is to maintain these parts during their service life, replace them before they fail. It's also important to have an adequate inventory of spare parts so operations won't be interrupted. And that's what we try to do. We analyze critical parts of our operation and we keep critical spare parts so that we will never be, we won't be out of business. We won't get to the point where we can't serve our customers. And in my 32 years here, that's never happened. So we're going to keep doing what we're doing. And that's really what asset management is all about, is making sure that we can always serve the customer's demands. So what I'll do is give you a brief overview. I'm not going to go through every project. If there's some that I skip over and you have questions, please feel free to ask. At Quartz Hill, the big one we're doing is the GAC replacement in the last 6 filters. This is phase 3 of Quartz Hill GAC replacement. That's an $800,000 estimated cost. Last year we did 6 filters at Quartz Hill, and we did the 6 filters at Eastside Treatment Plant. So this will complete the GAC replacement. GAC life expectancy is about 10 to 12 years, depending on influent water quality from the aqueduct. But this should be the last GAC expenditure for at least the next probably 7 years, because we started this project in phases about 5 years ago. The rest of the project at Quartz Hill are replacement of pumps, actuators, chlorine analyzers, and so forth. At the Roseman plant, which is coming online this week, we're doing some more pumps and so forth. But we're replacing some chlorine analyzers, and you're going to see that at all the plants. The chlorine analyzers that were initially installed as part of the DBP project in 2008 are now obsolete. You can't get parts for them, so we're slowly replacing them with newer models from a different company with the promise that they'll be supported for the next 15 years. At the Eastside Treatment Plant, again, chlorine analyzer replacement, some valves, some actuators. At the Westside Water Bank, you see replaced tractor. When we first started the water bank, we bought a John Deere skip loader, and we bought a New Holland little skidster, which is a little track loader. That was the low bid at the time. We thought it was a good tractor. It just cannot handle what we do with it day to day. Had a lot of repair bills on this one, and it's just the hydraulic system is inadequate for what we need it to do. So what we'd like to do is replace it, put out bids for a new one, but this time we'll go with a Caterpillar or a Bobcat or a John Deere, something that's more suited to construction rather than farm equipment, which is what New Holland is. And then we will either keep this tractor and use it as a standby, or we will declare it surplus and sell it, or even trade it in, depending on what pricing is. But we'll certainly bring all this back to the board.
Hey, John, I have a question.
Go ahead.
On the tractors. So, I remember I think we approved this. It's a larger tractor, isn't it?
No, this is a small one, Frank. This is one of the first ones we bought.
No. The new one, the replacement.
The new one we haven't got.
The one we purchased in the current or previous.
I'm sorry. Yeah, we did purchase a backhoe for our maintenance department. That was a John Deere. So we did get that.
Okay, and that is to replace the smaller tractors because they weren't adequate for what kind of work we're doing.
Well, no, that one is actually, Frank, it's a backhoe. We want our maintenance department to do some pipeline work and some underground valve replacement, and we had no way of excavating without renting a backhoe. So this is specifically for the maintenance department, not the water bank.
Okay. And then and the other tractors, you're just going to refurbish them and use them for smaller jobs?
The smaller tractor that we're talking about replacing or using less, that's for the water bank, and that's for building up berms around the ponds, repairing berms, some weed abatement, and so forth. So, yeah, that's.
Is that a tractor? A tractor, or is that a small Caterpillar?
It's like a Bobcat style. It's small and it's got the rubber tracks on it, so it can.
Okay, I understand.
Go in the mud and so forth.
I understand.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, let's see. At Acton, even though the Acton treatment plant is offline, certainly we use the pump station, buy water from PWD, and we pump it up to the Vincent tank. We've rehabbed several of those high lift pumps, and we're going to do our third one this year, just to make sure that we can always deliver water to District 37 up there. On the feeders, this is our distribution system. We're slowly replacing our old style prop meters to magnetic meters, mag meters. They have no moving parts. They're very accurate. And since this is really how we measure our water sales and revenue, we think it's important to replace these with updated magnetic meters. We do, the board did authorize purchase of 10 of these in the past, and we do have them, but now we're going to slowly start replacing them now that our maintenance department is getting up to speed. Under the maintenance department, you see a new stake bed truck with lift gate and crane. Currently, when our guys pull pumps, which we're doing a lot of now, we're having to put a vertical turbine set of pump bowls in the back of a pickup truck and run them up to Bakersfield to get them rebuilt, and it's not the most convenient way to do it. So we're thinking if we get a stake bed truck, that will handle the taking pumps back and forth. We can have a small crane on it where we can lift different things and just be better for the maintenance department. I feel be a good investment. And the last thing I'll point out is under administration, I think all of you have been up here and you've probably seen people walking down our driveway or riding bikes down our driveway, and not so good for security. So we're talking to DWR. We're going to put an electric gate up at the aqueduct where our driveway goes up into the aqueduct. That is DWR property, so they'll require an electric gate with DWR key switch. So we're working on that, but we think it'll add to the security of the area around the treatment plant. So we're going to work on that in the new fiscal year.
That's a great idea. Great idea.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we've all seen, especially on the weekends, believe it or not, the front gate is closed, but that gate's open and people are walking around the parking lot. Our operators have to tell them they probably shouldn't be in there. So anyway.
Yeah, it's a big liability if somebody were to get hurt and they shouldn't be on the plant when they're not authorized.
For sure.
The plant, I mean, yeah. So great job.
Thank you. Well, that's all I have. I just wanted to give a kind of a high-level overview of projects. If there's any questions, be happy to answer them.
John, when we replace the pumps, is it just preventative maintenance because you think useful life, or
yeah?
Why don't we just wait till they go out? Is there?
Well, the problem is if you wait till they go out, the lead time to get parts and pumps is so long, then you're without a spare pump, you're without redundancy. So being a water utility, we feel like we have to, there's a useful life, and we rebuild pumps all the time and we take care of them, but they get to a point to where they're just not dependable anymore. And that's when we replace them.
And some of those pumps, how many years approximately would they?
Oh boy, George, some of these pumps are original from 1975, believe it or not. But we do have our maintenance department. Actually, what we're doing now is our maintenance department is doing vibration testing, amperage testing, flow testing. So before something really starts going out, we'll know that there's something wrong with that pump, and we'll either rebuild or replace. But typically 30 years of a pump, 35 years, depending on what style of pump, is a pretty good service life. Well, if there's no more questions, I thank you for your indulgence.
To complete the recap of the capital budget, we have some carryover projects from last year associated with our IT and planning projects, about $1.4 million. And the summary there is down below. And so you can see that we've added $10,250,000, $10 million of which is the SNP line. And then the carryover projects that we have, our new asset management projects for approximately $2.5 million. Carryover projects from last year for both IT and the other. When you add it all up, it's $28,700,000 approximately. Total projects contained within the capital budget, or capital program, I should say. Okay. Next, we want to move on to the personnel budget, and if you want to zoom in a little bit, Holly, if you could do that. This is our cost of living graph, and this is a graph that we've used historically, and we use the April number, and you can see if you look through these here, this is the April number that we've used, so you can see in 2011 it was 3.9. 2.5% in 2017. We had 0 in 2015, and we had 0.6 last year. And in both of these cases, the board approved a 1% COLA increase. And so we wanted to acknowledge that. And then this is the 4.2% that is for this year. As you can see, even in these months here, you can see that the inflation rate's going up a little bit. And so what that means and what the Personnel Committee recommended is that we provide the board with two options. One's the 4.2% COLA, which they recommended as being included in the budget, and then but recognizing the fact that last year a 1% increase was given, and that would if we went with a 3.8%, that would be a COLA that's over the 2-year period that would be consistent. And you can see that here's the costs associated with the 4.2% COLA, and you got the $200,000 here, step increases, and what those cost. We have a one-time salary adjustment that is being recommended by the Personnel Committee, and we'll get into that a little bit more. And then we have our retirement costs, our taxes, and some reduction in our insurance at $515,000. And if we go with the 3% COLA, it's basically the same amounts. The only difference is there was a reduction in there. It goes down to $492,675. These step increases are part of our normal civil service type system that we have. The retirement, taxes, insurance, are ongoing personnel costs.
I have a question. What I don't understand is, I saw the 4.2, but I don't understand the 3.8. Why would you give us? Why is there an option? I don't understand. Because we gave them 1% last year.
Correct, and that's
but what was the COLA last year?
The COLA last year was 0.6%.
So we gave them 0.4% to bring it up to 1%.
Correct.
Yeah, I support the 4.2. That's my personal opinion. These guys, these ladies and gentlemen that work in this agency. I should be knocking on wood when I say this, but we don't have anybody getting hurt. They really don't ask for much, and they got a good package. I know that, but at the same time, the personnel does a good job, and I personally think we should give them the 4.2.
And that's consistent with the Personnel Committee's recommendation, but they wanted to give both options for the agency's review. Okay. There was one additional position in last year's budget. There was a new. If you want to zoom in a little bit, make that a little better clearer. It's the field project engineer. It's located here. This was approved in last year's budget for implementation this fiscal year. So we've included that in our budget calculations for this year, but wanted to remind the board that this additional position would be included in this year's budget.
Okay, but I'm also a firm believer that we might have approved that position, but what you just showed us about the water rates and sales going down, we don't just hire people because the board decides, there's a hole there. I mean, to me, you have to prove that, we really, really need that person to fill those shoes. So that's, to counter what you just said. But look at the budget. I mean, everything shows that less water sales. We're drawing more water out of the ground. It's just, if we're replacing somebody, that's a different issue. I mean, we got to replace them. But, that new person, a new job, does it really need to be, do we really have to hire that person? That's something I guess I have to learn.
Yes, and the Personnel Committee did review this position, and when it was originally approved and the board approved it, and this field engineering position, as you know, we're going to be doing quite a bit of construction work over the next several years, both at High Desert and Stipline and some of the capital improvements that we currently have out to bid. And the intention is to have this person assist in the field to be able to offset other costs that we would have to hire if that person was not available, or we would use outside consultant services.
What are they, an inspector? Or, what is it?
I would say a bit of an inspector, but also our eyes and ears out in the field. They also will be making sure that the work that's being done on change orders or force account work or any type of work like that is actually being accomplished. Doesn't take the place of a construction management firm for the larger projects, but for the smaller projects, it really allows us to have a good field presence out in the field to be able to make sure that we're getting what we pay for, and it's just good business practice.
The Personnel Committee on several different occasions. And just a little bit of background, starting with the agency's strategic plan that was adopted by the board several years ago. It includes Strategy 2, Objective 2, specifically stated that the agency is going to evaluate the compensation system to ensure competitive and merit-based compensation, also known as a total compensation study. When we say total compensation study, that's looking at everything, not just salaries, but also taking into account the generous benefit package that the agency offers, including medical and retirement, etc. So, the board at the time when they include that with the strategic plan, thought it'd be a good idea to have an outside agency perform that evaluation and study to ensure that there's confidence with the salaries being offered for the various positions within the agency, and to ensure that the salaries and total compensation package is competitive to various water agencies that have like-minded missions and goals. So next slide, please.
Okay.
Yeah, a little more background. So this process started back in March of 2020, right when COVID was starting. So at that time, we entered into a contract with Koff and Associates that performs these type of studies throughout the industry and state. And their scope of work include those 4 tasks there you can see on the left. A big part of the scope was identifying comparative agencies that, like I said, had in-kind services being offered by the agencies, and then looking at their organizational structure, job descriptions, and then looking at the total compensation that they offer, not just salaries, but that benefits and retirement programs that I mentioned. So in July of 2020, our consultant presented the findings to the Personnel Committee. And at that time, with all the unknowns with the pandemic, the recommendation by the committee was to just put on hold for another 6 months. So in December, we brought that back to the committee for further consideration and discussion. And we talked through how the adjustments would be implemented to be both fair to the employees, but also taking into consideration the financial impact to the agency. So staff presented in April the recommendation of what we're calling a phased approach to implement the new total compensation study presented by the consultant. So next slide, please. So here you can see a slide I took from the consultant's presentation, and looks at the comparative agencies I mentioned and the criteria that they use, the type of organization, the population, number of employees, the budget, service and programs, taking into account the labor market and also cost of living. You know, it's not fair to compare our salaries to some agency like in Orange County where the cost of living is much higher than Antelope Valley. Next slide, please. So these are the 12 agencies that the consultant kind of honed in on to use as comparators. You can see some local agencies there, Palmdale Water District, Mojave Water Agency to the east, also a state water contractor. San Bernardino Valley is also a state water contractor, as well as Santa Clarita Valley. We were not able to get good comparative information from Kern County, but their types of services that they offer much different from the agency. And then we have a few agencies there that are more on the retail side, but do have similar type job descriptions and employees that perform maintenance and distribution work. Next slide, please. So the recommendations that were discussed with the Personnel Committee is to implement the total compensation study by moving individuals to the proposed range and step that closely aligns with their current step and range. And I've got a slide to exhibit or to show an example of that. And then therefore, the employees would then be evaluated each year for recommended step increases, as we do now, based on their performance evaluation. And as Dwayne showed in that earlier slide, the financial impact or increase to the budget from last year is about $147,000 in year one of implementing the new total compensation study recommendations. Next slide. So Dwayne kind of hit on this as well. With most public agencies like ourselves, each position is given a range, and within that range, there's typically 6 steps, and it's 5% increase between each step. And then between each range, it's typically 5.5% differential. Next slide. So, for example, if there's an example of how the implementation would work. If an employee is at a current salary range, they're typically given a number, and they're at step 5 within that current range. We would move them to the proposed salary range and step that closely aligns to where they're currently at, without reducing anybody's salary. So there'd be a small increase throughout the 45 existing employees to move to the new salary range. And then we would place them, like I said, within the step that closely aligns where they're currently at. And then what this would do, rather than just increasing the salary all at once, which would be, in some cases, a substantial increase, it simply allows them more steps to grow into over the coming years. and like I said earlier, this would be tied to their performance and evaluation by the managers and supervisors. So it's not a guarantee, it'd be performance based, but it would give employees, like I said, opportunity for growth without a huge 1 year financial impact to the agency. So that's the rest, the end of my presentation. I can safely say that the Personnel Committee supported this implementation, but wanted to run it by the full board before we implemented it. And our proposed 2021-22 budget that was presented this evening includes the plan to implement this with a $147,000 increase in year one. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think it was well done.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on from personnel onto the agency reserves. And once again, Holly, can you increase the size of this for me? Thank you very much. So we have the board has a policy, and they have 5 reserves levels. They vary in range. And so what you can see here is we have an operating reserve, which is 12 months of operating budget, which is $23 million. And that's minimum and the maximum range. That's just that operating reserve. We have a drought contingency reserve, which is 7% to 20%. So you can see it ranges between $2 million and almost $6 million. And that's of our annual budget and water sales revenues. So you can see how that works. And if we had a significant drought where we had very reduced amount of water sales, we could use part of this reserve to be able to compensate for that reduction in revenue. That's also very important in our this particular reserve is very important for Moody's and what's the other rating? Standards and Poor's, yes. So the rating agencies to make sure that we have some kind of contingency for drought purposes. And then the big one here is the capital improvement replacement reserve, and that runs between 12 million up to 47 million. It's associated with a 1-year cost and then a 5-year cost. And then we have our state water contract reserve, which ranges from 50% to 100%. So you can see here that we have close to 14 million, I should say, in that reserve up to 28 million. Available for, as we mentioned, if DWR costs should increase significantly for some particular reason, we can utilize those reserves without having to increase the tax rate. And then we have our post-employment benefit liability that runs about $11 million. We have a reserve for that. So when you add those all up together, you want to move that up just a little bit on the screen, Holly. Thank you. You can see that our range of reserves are between 116 million to 164 million. And so our non-designated reserves go from 94 million to 141 million with the $5.8 million, $158 million reserve total that we are balance that we had as of June 30th of 21.
Which I'm not quite following. Non-designated meaning what?
In other words, those are reserves that are not contained within our reserve policy. So they're not designated for any purpose. These are the reserves that can be utilized for our capital programs and other things. They haven't been designated for any particular purpose.
Used in which program?
What's that? We use these undesignated reserve amounts for our capital improvement program. So, any other questions with regards to our reserves? Once again, you want to increase the total here. Font that. Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate that. And so we start out with our cash reserves of this year of $158 million. We then do a calculation to determine what our estimated cash reserves are going to be at the end of the fiscal year. And so you can see we start with our minimum reserve, our excess cash that's associated with that. The budget surplus is it was actually $4.1 million if we include what the finance committee has recommended. We have our capital and IT budgets, our project carryover, and our debt principal payments of $5 million. So what it leaves us with about $67 million in reserves. And if we go to the highest level, it's at 14.2 million reserve. So we end up with a reserve balance of approximately 130 million. And that's assumed that we complete all these projects, but it is the most conservative approach when determining what our reserve balance will be. It's likely it'll be a little bit higher than this when we get to June of next year, but for budgeting purposes, we want to make sure that we're as conservative as possible. Whoops. That's my last slide. Unless there's any other questions from staff, we would be open to adoption of the budget and passing of the resolution.
I have a question. Did the budget include the higher amount on the COLA increase?
Yes, it did.
Okay, so if we agree to this budget, everybody's agreeing to that. I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention along with everything else that's been proposed.
Great.
Was that COLA at that 4.5? What Frank said you wanted it at
4.2.
Yeah,
is what the finance committee had recommended versus the 3.8.
Okay.
Are there any further questions? Are there any questions from the public? Hearing none, let's consider Board Order 7A1, approving the budget and work plan for fiscal year 2021 and 2022 and appropriating funds therefore.
I'll move on it. Director Donato, I'll move on the board order.
I'll second.
I'm sorry, who seconded?
This is Shelley. I said I'll second, but kind of Rob and I kind of said it at the same time.
Ladies first, Shelley, you get it.
Okay, Shelley.
Okay.
All right. Is there any further discussion?
I'd like to say one thing. With all the committees that are involved, I want to thank Keith for, he appoints the committees, and they did a really good job on this. We're coming in some interesting times these last couple of years. It seems like it's always a new adventure in society. But I'm glad that, we bring these things up. We bring them up to the public so they know what we're doing. And I believe this is a very good, sound budget. And I think our staff's going to look at a couple of things. And, hopefully when we went to the 5%, that's a worst case scenario. I'd always like to say, I got some good news instead of some bad news. But anyway, you guys did a good job. I appreciate this.
Thank you for the excellent comments.
Yeah, Mr. President, this is George. Yeah, my comment, I'm relying a lot upon the Personnel Committee and the Finance Committee. You've had a chance to look at it a little less than an hour and a half, and it seems reasonable. I know the committee's looked at it in some details, but again, I'm relying a lot upon the hours put in by the committees. But I think we need to be somewhat, careful of our capital improvement cost, and we just don't know what's going to happen with this drought, if it's going to be here for a year or 10 years. But dollars are hard to come by, and we need to be conservative as much as we can. And there's a lot of good projects, and probably all of them are good, but are they necessary? And when we afford it, we need to look at that and look at each project with that in mind. As far as replacements with the depreciation and our maintenance, we've got to go ahead with. We've got to go ahead with that, and I think that's important. We don't want that to get ahead of us. But if we can sell all the water we have now with the facilities we have now, we probably don't need to do a whole lot of new capital improvements. I think the water banks are great investments, but we just need to be careful.
Thank you for the words of caution. Are there any more comments? In that case, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Gary Van Dam?
Yes.
Audrey Miller?
Yes.
Robert Paris?
Yes.
George Lane?
Yes.
Shelley Sorsable?
Yes.
Frank Donato?
Yes.
Mike Dias?
Yes, the measure passes. Thank you all very much for the hard work you put into this. And now, I believe we will move on to item 7.1, closed session. Do we have, let's see, what's the purpose of the closed session?
We're scrambling here.
Oh, here it is.
Good evening, this is Matt. So the item for consideration in closed session is conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation pursuant to Government Code, Section 54956.9, and including significant exposure litigation and consideration of initiation of litigation concerning enhanced infrastructure financing district. One case.
Thank you very much.
And this was an addendum added 24 hours in advance.
Thank you. All right, do I have a motion that we go into closed session for the reasons stated?
This is Director Miller. I'll move that we go into closed session.
Thank you.
This is Director Sorsable. I'll second.
Thank you. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Gary Van Dam?
Yes.
Audrey Miller?
Yes.
Robert Paris?
Yes.
George Lane?
Yes.
Shelley Sorsable?
Yes.
Frank Donato?
Yes.
Mike Dias?
Yes, the measure passes, and we will go into closed session as soon as Holly can make the transformation.
Thank you. Please stand by.